Looks like you did it, Shannon.
I was going to say, are you all looking at are you looking at the Facebook Live or are you looking at the PowerPoint?
Looking at the PowerPoint.
Okay, good. All right. I think we have everything. Sorry, let me just.
We're trying something new tonight, folks. We first time that we've actually also tried to stream this live to Facebook at the same time we're doing the webcast. So Shannon's figuring that out as I talk to you right now, and we'll be getting underway here in just a second.
All right. Well, thank you to everyone for joining us on the River Rising Solutions webcast. I'm Shannon Blankenship, Advocacy Director at St. John's Riverkeeper, joined by my co-host, Jimmy Orth, Executive Director. Today on episode 5 of the River Rising Solutions webcast, we will discuss the policies that encourage residential solar in Florida, as well as the potential for solar expansion that we can do today. We'll be joined by Angela DeMonbrin, Regional Field Director for Solar United Neighbors. And today we will cover climate change mitigation versus adaptation. We will then have our guest speaker join us to find out how solar is an essential part of the overall solutions puzzle needed to reduce our dependence on fossil fuels. And last, we'll end with viewer comments and questions. So for everyone that's tuned in, we welcome you to join us for that. But to begin, Jimmy, will you tell people about St. John's Riverkeeper and how this web series helps us to fulfill our mission to defend the St. John's and advocate for its protection?
Yeah, absolutely. I know a lot of you on the call or on the joining us today are probably familiar with Riverkeeper, but we are a nonprofit advocacy group for the St. John's River. And our job is really to hold the elected officials, the regulatory agencies accountable, and to make sure that we have strong environmental protections and that they're being implemented and enforced. We do that through a lot of different ways, through our advocacy team. Shannon is our advocacy director, but also through our education and outreach team. And we do a lot in terms of raising awareness in the community about the issues that are affecting the river, and also going into the schools, well, pre-COVID, but going into the schools and providing programming for students and teachers, which has been very successful over the years. This series really started because of our concern about how the dredging project that's underway right now was projected to increase storm surge and water levels during storms. And so we decided we really need to have a conversation in Jacksonville and in the communities around Jacksonville and throughout the watershed really about the threats from rising water and how that impacts the St. John's. Because when we have problems like climate change and we see the water temperatures in the water increase, they also leads to more algae blooms. When we see flooding, it leads to more pollution that flows into our waterways and sewage sludge and sewage overflows. So there's a lot of threats that are posed to our river and to our communities from climate change and sea level rise. So that's how this started. And now, after we've done a lot in raising awareness, we've decided to really shift over to the solution side so that we can really talk about how to solve this problem and prepare for a future of rising water.
So on today's episode, we're actually taking a step back. So far in this series, we've covered topics that deal with adaptation. So how do we adapt to a future of rising waters here in the St. John's River watershed? But today, though, we'll discuss mitigation. How can we actually mitigate our impact on the creation of the greenhouse gases that have put us in this place in the first place, where sea level rise threatens our communities and our cities, our infrastructure, and our neighborhoods? Now, most cities take a holistic approach to resilience, and they've adopted policies that address both mitigation and adaptation. Some of these policies might be a transportation plan that incentivizes bikes, bus transit, carpooling, or electric vehicles. It could also be green buildings and low impact development, water conservation retrofits on existing buildings. It may look at the waste stream, recycling mandates, the local food supply, and what policies can expand access to these programs. But the first place that we need to look at is our own energy use. In the state of Florida, we're blessed with ample sunshine, and we've known for decades that solar power can and should be a part of our carbon reduction strategy. And so I'm excited to discuss this topic today. But before we do that, Jimmy, can you help us kind of connect the dots? And how does our choice in our electricity impact the St. Johns River?
Yeah, well, as we all know, the vast majority of greenhouse gases and, of course, carbon dioxide that we're spewing into the atmosphere that's contributing to climate change is from the burning of fossil fuels. And I think that we've talked about on this show before what some of those implications are for the St. Johns River in terms of climate change and sea level rise. But I think the other thing we have to realize is that when we burn fossil fuels, we also put a significant amount of pollutants into the atmosphere. And those pollutants actually come back down in the terms of air deposition. It can be wet deposition or dry, and that comes back down into our waterways. And so we see that with nitrates. A lot of large percentage of the nitrogen pollution that's in our waterway is from air deposition when it rains. The other is mercury. Mercury is a huge problem. So many of our fish, unfortunately, our fisheries are contaminated with mercury. And so I think that's something too, that when we move to these renewable sources of energy and more green sources of energy, if you will, we actually can reduce the amount of emissions going into the atmosphere, not only helping us solve the climate crisis, but also reducing the amount of pollution that ends up in our waterways.
So the solutions for mitigating our impact to climate change are varied, and we'd like to be able to cover them all. Hopefully we will in this series. But tonight we want to focus on one piece of this puzzle, and that's solar. So I now want to bring in our guest into the discussion. Angela DeMonbran oversees Solar United Neighbors field programs in Florida, Texas, Arizona, and Colorado, and she serves as the state director for the Florida program. Angela is a fourth-generation Floridian, and prior to joining Solar United Neighbors, Angela served as president of the League of Women Voters of Jacksonville's First Coast, working to increase informed voter participation through education, advocacy, and she still volunteers as their environment director. So Angela, tell me about Solar United Neighbors. Hopefully you were able to, okay, good, unmute yourself. Tell me about Solar United Neighbors and where do you all fit into this network of solar professionals in Florida?
Sure. So thank you for having me. As Shannon mentioned, I am in Jacksonville native and longtime supporter of St. Johns Riverkeeper and everything that you do. So thank you for all of the work. It's a lot. It's hard. So who is Solar United Neighbors? We are actually a national nonprofit, and we have 12 or 13 states now. And what we do is we help communities go solar by sharing through our solar co-op program, by giving people and communities the tools to make informed decisions on and going solar together. We're well known here in Florida from our bulk purchasing programs that we offer, but we are a national nonprofit, and we have a very interesting, I'll share quickly, story on our humble beginnings. That in 2007 in DC, our now executive director, her son went to see the movie Inconvenient Truth and came home and said, we've got to do something. Let's put solar on our roof. And at the time, 2007, there was only 2 installers in the area. It seemed like very expensive, by the way, just 12 years ago. So the process being intimidating, she tasked her 12-year-old son to go find some neighbors that would love to look into this process deeper, learn the solar basics, as well as see if there's interest to go together as a group and maybe everyone put solar on their roof in the neighborhood. So they collected about 50 signatures and they literally had living room meetings sent out a request for proposal like a formal committee would. And that was the birth of the very first solar co-op. And since then, we have grown rapidly. That mom is now the executive director, Anya Schoolman. And it's just, it's an incredibly popular program. I would say Florida being the largest state program within our organization. And then we had an individual in Orange County, Orlando in 2015 hear this story on NPR about bringing solar co-ops to your community. And she reached out and developed the first co-op in Orange County. And then it just became 60 people ended up going solar. And then a neighboring neighborhood ended up wanting to look into it further. And then they helped fundraise to bring the program. And I've been the director ever since. Since then, we've developed and we just launched our 58th co-op in the state, and it's just an incredible amount. Thousands of people have gone solar just within the program, but more than that, it's really based on community education, and we've helped nearly 12,000 people, giving them the tools to make an informed decision. Solar for many is still very intimidating. The process, the terminology, of the technology, how it works. Will my utility allow me to do this? Are there incentives? How much does it cost? Of course, is the number one question. We give everyone the tools to make an informed decision. At the end of the day, they may go solar outside of the group. We're thrilled regardless. We've grown and partner actually with a number of counties and cities that have had repeat groups. For example, and later on in the presentation, we can share the latest with Orlando, but primarily our largest metropolitan areas in the state have repeated groups. It also aligns very well with cities and counties that have adopted Ready for 100 or clean energy goals that they want to reach. And we're seen as an organization that can help them reach those goals quickly. So that's kind of what we do. Again, we're a national nonprofit, 501c3. And we really just delve really into the education, but also, and we're very transparent about this, we want to be able to build the solar army and let people know about anti-solar policies, whether it's at the local, state, or national level, and really engage them. We believe that solar, people have a right to go solar, and as well as expanding solar. Florida is tricky, and we'll kind of delve into policy a little bit later, whereas we would love for solar to be expanded to not just people that can put it on their roof or have a good roof or own a home. We want to expand it to everyone that would love to be a solar owner. So that's pretty much who we are and what we do on a daily basis.
Well, I think that's helpful. It's helpful to know you don't install it, you don't write policy, but you give people the transparent information that they need to decide whether or not going solar is right for them. And I think, as we'll see a little bit later on, you also do a really good job of drumming up support in communities, in cities, and neighborhoods to get that critical mass of people going solar to make it a good fit for some of those providers to do so. So thank you for giving us that background on your organization. To jump into solar as a solution to climate change, can you tell me sort of where does solar fit in, and what is the solar capacity here in the state of Florida, fitting into our energy grid?
Sure. So we did have a few images that I shared with you earlier, Shannon, if you could pull those up. The first one is really to give everyone a sense of total U.S. greenhouse gas emissions by the economic sector in 2018. And by the way, these came really from the EPA and our partner organization, Vote Solar. Just to give you a sense of the electricity, it's 27%. And then we can kind of go into the Florida mix. And then in particular, what you find interesting is JA's mix of where they're receiving. So we're already pulling like 27%. And so a lot of utilities, you're hearing that they want to reduce and diversify their mixture of where the energy comes from. You also see that demand coming from individuals, really pressuring their utilities on what where their energy comes from, if they're going to pay the bill, certainly. And this actually just came out. So our utilities in the state of Florida, our largest ones, certainly JA and Orlando being the largest municipal utilities, but primarily our investor-owned utilities like FBL, Duke, TECO, they have to actually submit 10-year site plans. And it kind of gives an idea of where we are in 2019, as well as where they're planning over the next 10 years. And as you can see, JA is, they are expanding their use of coal, which is very unfortunate. Whereas we can tell you, just aligned with the programming that we bring and the cities that we work with, and I'll speak to Orlando because it's also municipal utility. Yes, their coal use is still high, but they're planning on reducing that. And I can tell you, they see like rooftop solar in our programming and solar in general as a part of that mix and adding on to that. Whereas JA doesn't have that. JA, in fact, is not supportive whatsoever of rooftop solar. And it's unfortunate that in many cases, and we do see this across the board with utilities in Florida, where if they don't own the solar, they don't care for it. Like they want, if they don't control it and own it, like they're very happy about the fact and tout their utility scale solar programs as long as they own them. But they're not at all thrilled with you putting solar on your roof. And in fact, many of them, JA has already done this, want to eliminate your right to put it on your roof and place unneeded barriers. So this gives you an idea of JA today. This is their energy mix for 2019. And you can see natural gas is a huge piece of that. Coal is a quarter. And then you see that teeny little sliver of solar. And then you see the plans that they've proposed in their 10-year site plan to the Florida Public Service Commission is increasing solar, yes. However, also increasing coal. And it's kind of an outlier, I believe, along with Seminole utility in the state, whereas they're really the only two, especially the largest ones, that are actually increasing coal. And only a sliver more increasing solar, where you see other utilities really adding to their renewable mix of energy. And by the way, they're doing this because the same reason why many people are putting on their roofs, the cost of solar has come down dramatically. Over the last decade, almost 90% the cost of solar. That's why people want to put it on their roof. That's also why you see very grandiose announcements about utilities. We see them in our JA bills where they're touting adding additional solar, and you can even sign up for a solar subscription program through JA. They see the benefit. They also see it's on parity with other fuel sources in their energy mix. So this is just kind of gives you a snapshot, and we'd love to push back on this because JA, by the way, many people don't realize this as well. They're the 8th largest municipal utility in the nation. And so they're very large, and they need to be have a bigger footprint in Florida and serve as an example. Whereas we see Orlando, we can say for sure they are serving as an example. They're encouraging rooftop solar. They also have a utility mix. They also have a great sustainability and resilience director that's been on staff for a number of years that's driving these changes. And I know the city of Jacksonville is looking into that, and that's terrific. We need to be doing more for being in just as large of a municipal area in Florida, also subject to sea level rise. We should be leading and not really from behind. And this is really comparison to our other areas like Tampa, certainly South Florida areas, and I compare us to Orlando, but we really should be doing better.
Yeah. Well, Angela, it's interesting you mentioned Orlando, because one of our future guests is going to be Chris Castro, the sustainability director for Orlando, is coming on and talking about some of their plans. One thing you did say that I have a question about, I know that I've been watching solar, the cost of it come down per kilowatt hour, cost of it come dramatically, cost of panels. And one of the things I know that has been a challenge in the past, but I believe it's being resolved to a certain degree, is battery storage, because Obviously, there's a concern that, if we don't have, if the sun's not shining, we need to also have storage for that energy for times when the solar panels are not producing energy. Can you say a little bit about that and how far along they've come in terms of battery storage and the progress that's being made?
Sure. I definitely, I can share when we first started the program in 2016, within our educational programming that we would offer at our solar information sessions, we barely touched on battery storage. We would hear from a few people that were interested in it, but it was still very expensive. And maybe a couple people would actually move forward. However, since Hurricane Irma, since the years of back-to-back hurricanes, we heard from many people that they want to hear more about battery storage. And so we've woven that into all of our programming, certainly around coastal areas, people that had, and by the way, we used to say, the grid is kind of your backup. It is reliable. However, that really changed when you had people after Hurricane Irma and Michael and Matthew that were out of power and for weeks at a time. So now we see, as well as the technology has certainly improved. There's a wide ranging, more of a range of options out there. The cost has come down, certainly not like our system components of a solar system like panels and inverters have, but it continues to go down because of the demand. We see virtually every installer that we work with through our programming offers this now. So and definitely for resilience reasons, quite honestly, that's the number one reason we see people moving forward. It does still can almost double the cost of going solar, quite frankly. So, however, we are seeing, and this is one thing that JEA does have, want to give credit where credit is due. They do offer a storage rebate program. I don't know, the adoption rate, and OUC, Orlando's utility, just offered that too, to encourage more people to add storage onto their systems.
Great.
Angela, speaking of resiliency, because we're kind of starting to move in that direction, when it comes to resiliency, meaning the capacity for someone to recover after a disaster, tell me how solar kind of fits into the mix there, because this isn't all about solar for reducing greenhouse gas emissions, but solar as a way to help us be able to recover and be more resilient. But there are a lot of ways to do that.
Sure. So if you just put solar, just to make sure we're all clear, because it can be kind of confusing. So if you do put solar on your roof, if you don't have, you're still connected. If you don't have storage, you're still connected to the grid. So if you lose power, just like during Hurricane Irma or any hurricane or just a regular power outage, you lose power and you're subject to, when the grid's back up, then you're up and running again and you're producing your panels. If you have storage, you essentially have backup power and you don't necessarily have to worry about that. So that is, that's kind of the give and take, and that's why we're definitely seeing more people choose solar for that resilience reason, as well as past solar customers that are reaching out to the industry and the installers to add solar onto their existing systems for that resilience reason. But to be clear, just because you have it on your roof does not mean you have backup power.
I know we talked about before the capacity for expansion of solar to our emergency facilities, and a lot of our disaster recovery emergency shelters also are our schools and voting precincts. They serve many critical essential functions. If we were to, or explain a little bit more about expanding solar through public schools, and then how that could really help us in those times of need for disaster.
Absolutely. There was actually a program about 10 years ago through, I believe it was a Department of Energy grant or a stimulus funding source that came through our Florida Solar Energy Center, which is it's kind of under the umbrella of University of Central Florida. And they actually approve system designs for Florida, by the way, make sure they're wind rating and they can stand up to hurricane force winds. But they actually, working through the Florida Solar Energy Center, worked with a number of school districts and actually installed solar plus storage on close to 100 schools around the state. And I believe there are one or two in the Jacksonville area. That was 10 years ago, and that was incredibly expensive, but they did it. We would love for that program to be revisited, identifying those schools, because like you said, a lot of schools certainly are, they double as shelters for people that are, trying to flee a hurricane, as well as emergency response center. We would love that program to revitalize it and also expand it. But we would also, like to see like our emergency response centers. Let's allow them to put solar and storage. There was actually a bill a couple of years ago that was introduced by Representative Holly Rashine in the Keys. And it was right after Hurricane Irma, the session that after that, she tried to bring forth a bill, just putting it on emergency response centers, and it goes nowhere. And we've seen this time and time again, just expanding solar, putting it on schools, even in emergency response centers, continue to fail, unfortunately, in the state of Florida. And it's when we say elections matter, they truly do. And something that would be as easy and benefit the community, truly benefit the community, these type of bills seem to go nowhere with no real reason why. Our Tallahassee, as I believe, as being only 60 days and very few things, number one, get introduced or move forward if you're not in leadership. So we'd love everyone's help on that, because by the way, we help people put solar on the roof, but we feel very strongly we want to bring more solar to benefit actual communities. And for people that can afford it, we would love to see more community solar. And when I say community solar, this term is not in the sense of what we hear from utility scale. FBL's touted a community solar program that they call Solar Together. When we mean community solar, we mean it actually being owned by the community and it actually reducing an electric bill with the end user, not a solar subscription program that utilities have. But we want to expand solar beyond roofs, and it's unfortunately, whether it's a barrier at the local utility with the interconnection agreement, or at our Florida Public Service Commission or our legislature, it's very frustrating. But currently, right now, people can put it on their roof if they have net metering in the area, and we can certainly delve into that topic in JEA if you'd like.
Well, I did just want to, bring into the mix with this topic as well, is that if schools were to expand solar, then it's also a job training component. And so, a lot of these programs where solar is being really well, expanded in other states, partners, I think, are coming together and really trying to see multiple benefits in this, not just about reducing the need for greenhouse gases, but also resilience, but also job training, as well as, preparing us for those future storms in those emergency centers. So there's so many benefits to some of these programs that your partners in our other states are already working on, or other parts of the state of Florida.
Absolutely. I was just going to add that, Florida, the Solar Foundation released some numbers where the solar is the fastest growing job sector in Florida. And when we think of solar jobs, we don't just think of installers. There's so much behind the scenes, like between our permitting offices, the manufacturing. By the way, we have a solar manufacturing plant here in Jacksonville. We have a couple in Florida, by the way. The number of jobs across the board in the solar industry is really incredible. And the momentum we definitely want to keep going on with.
One thing, Angela, it seems like y'all's approach is obviously more of a decentralized type approach, in co-ops and do you see there being a benefit of the co-op approach over the utility scale, or do you think it needs to be a mix of both?
Well, I would say we're definitely a benefit. The more people that have solar on their roof, the less need for JA to truck in anything else besides solar. And I always am cautiously optimistic when we talk about utility scale solar, because the placement is kind of concerning. Like, we want to make sure we're not gobbling up all of our agricultural land for large, massive solar fields, and the community has buy-in wherever they're placing them. But it is true, like, and by the way, when you have solar on your own roof, whatever excess that you put back on the grid, the next door neighbor is going to grab that before anyone else. So there's less, it's only on the grid for a short amount of time. And as in addition, the more people that have it, there's less mix of, well, JA trucking and coal or natural gas. There's certainly be less need for them to venture into this Plant Vogel mess that they've tied themselves into. So the more people that have solar, the better. And it's again, Florida jobs, it's Florida sunshine.
I want to jump to, because we've referenced this a lot, I think, already in the conversation. What are the hurdles right now to solar expansion in Florida? And I know there's several, and I know you have a few links that you can share with folks here on that are participating on Zoom. But just talk to us about what's going on, and then just give us the exactly what it is we need to do and how we can help support some of these campaigns that you and your organization are helping to lead.
Sure. So specific to our area, we were actually going to develop a program a couple of years ago, one of our solar co-op programs, and then JA abruptly ended their net metering program. And so we moved on to, like, we've had 7 in Orlando and now 9 in the Miami area and just about everywhere else except for Jacksonville. And we, represented by Earth Justice, took them to court, fighting against their net metering. JA being the 8th largest municipal utility, they still fall under the Public Service Commission's rules. And we have net metering in place to serve as an incentive for people to go solar, and also to expand solar in the state. That was its initiative, initially what they wanted to do. And they essentially wiped that out. By the way, the same individuals that brought this forth and passed it, and there was stakeholder meetings. I believe Shannon or the St. John's Riverkeeper was a part of those. At the time, the staff and some executives and the board completely disregarded those recommendations and kind of made up their own rules, not just gutting net metering, but creating this billing mechanism. So we've heard time and time again from individuals that have tried to go solar thereafter that they feel like it was a horrible decision. Because, by the way, many people are going solar for environmental reasons, but just as many, if not more today, are going because of the economics of going solar. They see it as an investment, and they don't want to see a bunch of potential rate hikes. They have a 25-year investment that they can have guaranteed energy cost. So when you tweak the mechanism and the net metering, it's kind of a big gamble, and it's really served as a detriment to the solar industry here in Jacksonville. We've heard from individuals, we've heard from the industry that's just not working here anymore, or they're working in surrounding counties. So we've taken them to court, and unfortunately we're in the appeal process, and we just had the latest hearing this morning. So we'll see where this goes. It was a hearing on our oral argument. But overall, it's not just JA. JA is kind of the bigger fish. We're seeing this from smaller municipal utilities and rural cooperatives that you'll even in Clay County, you see Clay Electric. They have solar on their own buildings, but they're not solar friendly whatsoever. So we're seeing this time and time again, and we're having these pop-up fights between the utilities, or whether it's a permitting office. We also see this side of things where the industry will alert us about permitting office taking 6 to 8 weeks. That drives the cost of the overall cost of going solar. That cost is passed on to you that's wanting to go solar. All of that combined leads to less competition, fewer industry leaders actually working in an area, and it's just a domino effect. And so we actually work with SolSmart through the Department of Energy program that helps people have turnaround permitting processes or waiving some fees. It's kind of across the board, across all fronts that we see these fights. But we also see Florida is moving in the direction overall where the large utilities, they are 100% required to offer full net metering program. And they're already kind of tweaking things. They're already talking to the Public Service Commission as of just a couple of days ago, starting this conversation about net metering. And we really, really want to push back on that because people have the right to go solar. We want to give them the tools to do so. And there shouldn't be any impediment to going solar from utility. We should be working together. It should be a mix. Very similar to what we've seen with Orlando Utility. They have their program, but they're not only have a net metering program intact, they've actually partnered with us to help spread the word on the outreach side of things, bringing it to Orlando and all of Orange County residents. They see this as a part of reaching their renewable energy goals. And we see that in more of our progressive areas too, like Hillsborough County in Tampa. St. Petersburg is a terrific one to highlight, as well as Miami and Broward counties. And by the way, not just progressive areas, this is really an energy rights issue. In our very conservative rural areas, we see the same things. People don't like any utility telling them that they can't go solar or any indication that there's going to be a hurdle, additional fees or what have you. So that's what we work on, and we are crazy busy at it. I would say minute by minute, day by day in the state of Florida. It feels like it's never ending, but we work too on the educational piece and getting people out to reach out to their elected officials, reach out to the utility officials. And I do want to note again about the JA policy. We're continuing that fight. And by the way, everyone that passed that, including the board and at the executive level, has since resigned or asked to leave. And so we'd love to bring awareness to the public to say, with the whole privatization scheme, perhaps laying the groundwork to make the cost of JA favorable by gutting the policy and fewer people actually being on the books with the net metering could have very well been a part of that whole scheme and process. So, lots of work to do.
Well, thanks for the good work you're doing. I think we'll you ready to go to some questions, Shannon? Open it up.
Yeah, I actually had 2 submitted beforehand, and Angela, if you're willing to jump into audience questions now, someone wants to know, and you kind of just mentioned this, but I'll just make sure that we make it very clear for everyone. Where do things stand for individual homeowners going solar in Jacksonville in terms of what are the costs, the tax incentives, and battery storage options? We discussed that a little bit, but maybe just real clear. And then also, if you have a website for where people can find out, more about that, I think that would be really helpful for people too.
Sure. So the cost for anyone that's interested in going solar can vary, and it's going to vary by your current utility use, certainly how much space you have on your roof. And I say utility use because, like, if you were to meet or call an installer today, they're going to ask for your 12-month usage, and they're going to design a system based on that usage and if you have enough space on your roof, and it depends on what kind of system components you're looking for. High efficiency, the look, the type of inverter, there's a lot of variations. So what our program, I failed to mention, our program does is it actually can help bring down the cost because it brings a group of people together, and there's a potential for a reduced cost if everyone goes together as a group. But in the case of JA with their net metering, you don't have the one-to-one. So whatever excess, if you have excess, is put back on the grid. It's a very reduced rate. So for example, if I think we pay 10 or 11 cents a kilowatt hour. If you have solar, they used to reimburse you the full credit on your bill. Now it's basically been gutted to 3 pennies, if not lower. So a lot of people look at that. That's part of designing the system on your overall return on investment and payback time. So it actually can, if systems last 25 years, depending on the system and the overall cost, it may take you up to 20 years to pay it off. And then most people look at that and go, that doesn't make sense for me, unless you solely want to do it and you have that upfront cost for climate change or environmental reasons. And there are some people that do that, and that's great. But a lot of people look at the overall return on investment. In addition, JA does have I believe it's up to a $4,000 rebate on a battery of your choosing. And that's something you would work with your installer with. Currently, right now, we still have a federal tax credit. And so this tax year, your system install cost, you could receive a tax credit of 26%. Next year, it drops down to 22%, and then it drops off altogether. Nationally, we're working to get that extended, because that is a big, very large incentive for many people to put solar on the roof today. And I can drop a website in the chat here.
Perfect. Angela, you sent over some really great videos from your newest solar partners. And I want to see if it's possible to play them.
Last year, because of the support of Bloomberg Philanthropies and the American Cities Climate Challenge, we partnered up with a nonprofit called the Solar United Neighbors of Florida and essentially hosted these solar co-ops. The solar co-op is a group buying program where we bring together homeowners free of charge who are interested in learning about solar and procuring solar as a team. And essentially, we're able to find more affordable solar panels. Behind me, we were able to install 10 kilowatts on my house. And this is now lowering our utility expenditures almost to nothing. In addition, this upcoming solar co-op will include things like electric vehicle charging stations that you can procure, as well as a battery storage system. This past year, OUC has launched a battery rebate. So those who are interested in incorporating battery into their system can get about $2,000 off of the overall cost. I want to encourage all residents of Orange County, not just the city of Orlando, to join us. In the city of Winter Park, Maitland, and Apopka, or even unincorporated parts of our county. But we're opening this up to the entire county and really encouraging our homeowners to join us free of charge for this next solar co-op. Again, in order to join, visit us at solarunitedneighbors.org/Orlando. Hope to see you soon.
That was a great little promo of Orange County and the city of Orlando and some things that they're doing to expand solar. It would be great to see that in every county along the St. Johns River watershed. Angela, I want to thank you so much for spreading your knowledge and about solar and sunshine in Florida on tonight's webcast. And I want to promo our next episode. Tune in on August 12th at 4 p.m. for episode 6. We will be talking about climate justice and how climate solutions require climate justice. We'll be joined by Salome Garcia of the Clio Institute, the Policy and Campaigns Manager, and we'll discuss the overlap between the environmental justice movement and the climate crisis in order to understand the necessity of working together in order to reach common solutions. So tune in on August 12th. Thank you to everyone who tuned in tonight. Thank you, Angela and Jimmy, for y'all's participation. And everyone, have a good rest of your evening.
Thanks, everyone.